Hi, I'm Jose Bowen, here to talk to you today about teaching naked. Hopefully soon I'll be coming to your campus and talking about the how. What little things can you do to improve your classroom today and make it worth the extra cost that it will always cost to deliver faculty-student interaction? My basic thesis is that we have to demonstrate and increase the value of what happens in the most expensive space, which is that physical classroom when faculty and student interact. But here, I'm going to talk mostly about the why, about what's coming, what are the transformations, what's different about our current students, and why do we have to be ready for this? So, let's start with my basic assumption, which is that change is hard. Change is hard for faculty, and it's also hard for students. I do not think that we should be changing everything about our schools right away. Most of us cannot just reinvent all of our courses tomorrow. So a lot of my thinking is about what are the little things we can do to make our classrooms better easily and fairly quickly. But change is hard for our students too. Our students are not doing as well in college as we like. But mostly the research tells us that students are not changing in college, that liberal arts educations are not opening students' minds. They don't enter college and then 4 years later graduate understanding how to think critically, how to compare two different sides of an argument, how to think for themselves. In fact, it turns out that when students graduate, they are less academically motivated. They believe less in the power of research and science. And they're less likely to have opened their minds or changed their views about religious or political subjects. College has reinforced the things that they already believed before they got there. There's a key piece of evidence that actually comes from the Association of Christian Colleges, who wanted to find out, they wanted to prove to their constituents that if you want your children to stay in the faith, you should send them to Christian colleges. But they found out the opposite. They found out that, in fact, if you sent them to schools where students all kind of shared the basic assumptions, they began to question. But if you sent them to a state school that was not an explicitly Christian school, then they immediately segregated and isolated themselves, and they were more likely to graduate still in the faith than they were if they had gone to the school where everybody was of the same religion. I'm not sure that's a generalizable conclusion, but to me, that plus the other data suggests that students are going to college and their views are being reinforced. Their minds are not being opened. So the big question for us is, how can we open minds? To me, the answer is fairly simple. That our best chance for opening minds, for engaging students, happens when we're in physical proximity, when we're actually having a conversation, when we're in discussion. A lecture might be motivating for students, but it's not as likely to engage them in, so this is what you believe? How can I challenge that belief? What would happen if you believe something else? How would this other part of it, that discussion that happens is hard to do in a one-way lecture. So how can we create more time for that interaction with faculty and students? If we do that, it seems to me we have a much better chance of changing students' minds and also giving them the skills that employers want, like critical thinking. Not being able just to find information on the internet, but to be able to analyze that information, decide what's useful, what's correct, what's critical, and what's of use to the problem at hand. That's what we really want to do in our classes. And we'll be able to do that better when we have more class time for discussing and analyzing the data and less time for just delivering the first exposure. So my second assumption in thinking about this is that we've kind of got the perfect storm here. That what's coming is a combination of a public outcry, right? The public doesn't trust us. We have funding cuts. Legislatures want us to demonstrate value. And this issue of cost is not one that, as academics, we've paid enough attention to. The cost of our educational experience is enormous. And consumers are beginning to have more choice. They've always had some choice. They've always had community colleges, and they've always had residential private universities on the extremes. So if you think about it, a student who wants to take Econ 1, a basic course in the first 2 years of college, or even in high school, right? They could take the AP course for free and get college credit. Or they could take it in college. They could take it in an online environment, that's convenient. They can take it from a community college. Both of those might have a small fee, $40 a credit, perhaps. Or they could pay 10 times as much and take it at a state school for $400 a credit. Or they could take it at a nice private school, like where I teach, for $1,000 or $2,000 a credit. Think about what other products that you have in your house that you would pay 10 times more for more quality. Right? Would you buy a toaster for 10 times the price? Is there any toaster that I could make that would be 10 times or 20 times the value to you and worth the extra cost? Think cars. We'd all like a nicer car. We all might pay a little bit more for a car, but would you pay 10 times as much for a car? 20 times as much? But we routinely ask people to pay 10 times as much for a higher education without being able to demonstrate to them any additional value, any additional benefit beyond the benefit of brand. So for the big brand schools, Stanford and Harvard, you're going to be a Harvard man when you graduate. That's worth something. That's a benefit. It's not the same thing as having learned anymore. I'm not sure you can prove that you learned anything more. But you have a network, you have an alumni, you have connections. Those are benefits, right? Or if you come to my university, we have a bigger climbing wall. We have better residences. We have better food, right? I can sell an experience. But as the cost distribution expands and we have $0 or $40 a credit versus $1,000 or $2,000 a credit, it seems to me that for most of the population, the climbing wall, the football team, the experience, or the alumni brand may not be worth it. And if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So people are going to look for cheaper options. And they're going to look for cheaper options where they learn just as much. So there's going to continue to be pressure both for cheaper options, but for also demonstrating how much students learn. So if we can demonstrate that in this physical classroom that costs more, our students learn more, we can justify the cost. But if it turns out an online course is just as good as most of our evidence currently shows us, okay, if an online course is cheaper, we're going to lose that business. We're going to lose those students. So I think that what's coming is we're going to have to think more carefully about the relationship between our higher cost and our higher benefit. And up to now, most of the thinking about benefit has focused on the experience of college, Greek life, football, the benefits of our alumni association or our brand, but not on, if you come to us, you will learn more. We say that we have a liberal arts education. We say we offer more breadth than a professional school. I mean, we have some claims, but we don't really have the evidence to say, if you come here, we will open your mind. If you come here, you will be able to hold two sides of an argument in your brain at once before you make up your mind. That is what you will learn at our university, and here's how we're going to get you there. And that's where I think that especially residential and physical campuses need to focus, because faculty-student interaction is critical, and it can do that, but only if we really rearrange our classrooms and focus on that. Another point I'd like to make is that the internet increases competition of all types. So the internet is going to create competition that wasn't there before. It created competition for bookstores, bye-bye Borders. It created competition for CD and record stores, bye-bye Tower Records, right? They thought they had a product, and they confused the products, right? People weren't actually buying records. They were buying music, and music you can get on the internet. So it's true, if people are buying an experience and they want to go to football games and Greek life, then they'll have to come to your campus. But for some people, what they're buying is learning. And if they're buying learning, there's other ways to get that. So the internet will clarify the product, but it will also create new types of competition. One of those competitions is between amateur and professional. It used to be that in order to get a book published, you had to be a professor or have some credentials and have a publisher and have distribution. Now, anybody can go online and put up their materials. So it means that if you wanted to learn basic physics, before you might take a college course or buy a book written by a college professor. Now, just Google physics, and there's lots of information. It's not just Wikipedia. There are lots of former physics professors who have big websites. There are students who have websites, and there's also just amateurs. And so The problem is sorting through all of that and figuring out where the best information is for you. But competition will increase. It is going to continue to come. And the example I like to use is this is like Detroit in 1970. Right? In 1970, American automakers didn't see Japanese competition as being important. They said Hondas, Toyotas, Datsun, and Nissan, no, people like our big American cars. They're going to continue to drive them. We have brand, and our cars are just better. Okay, that might have been true in 1970. But when those cars got better, the economy changed, gas prices went up. But most importantly, Nissan and Toyota introduced Acura, Infiniti, and Lexus in the mid-'80s. That changed everything because those cars were actually better. So right now, maybe the University of Phoenix hasn't introduced its Lexus. But don't wait for that. It's coming. And other projects like Coursera, edX, the Minerva Project, we are going to have more competition from name brand institutions. And who wants to compete against the online program at Harvard and MIT? We're also going to have cheaper options. We'll have universities in India and other places doing things for cheaper than we can possibly do them. Then we're going to have not-for-profits. We're going to have people who are willing to say, I'm going to give this away because somebody gave me a couple of $1 million to do this. So competition is going to increase. And my guess is that those competitors will be able to demonstrate learning in ways that we can't now. So we need to think about that and get ahead of that. Final point is that, again, to me, technology is a means, not an end. That technology is only as good as the teaching and the course design into which you fit it. So we have to, my workshops start with learning goals and learning outcomes. What's the first thing we want to do? We want students to understand what is it we're going to teach them, what do we want them to do. Then we can evaluate what technology might be the right technology to use. But at the same time, there are three big changes that have happened in technology that have changed the lives of our students, and frankly, they've changed our lives too. And we need to consider them as we think about our course design and our learning outcomes. The first is our relationship with knowledge. It used to be that we had the knowledge and you had to come here to get it. And now knowledge is cheap. It's abundant. It's all over the internet. It's easily accessible, and it's not just Wikipedia, it's everywhere. So our relationship with knowledge is not so much, do you know this? But can you find it? And further, can you analyze which information is most relevant? Can you determine that is information that's useful, that is accurate, that I need it today? So understanding how Siri works, how Wikipedia works, how Wolfram Alpha works, how the different kinds of search engines and knowledge sorters work, and how to figure out what you need is actually more important. So I think the age of the closed book test is over, because in the workplace, life is open book. Everybody's using the internet to find information. If you can find information, do it. If my doctor uses an app to assess my risk for a heart attack, because in addition to adding cholesterol, she can add other information about my height and weight and get a more accurate read on my risk factors, why would I not want her to do that? Why would I say, no, in the old days, this required long division. And I want you to do long division to show me that you know something about it. I don't really care if my doctor can do long division. What I care about is that my doctor knows the right questions to ask and how to use the software to get me the right information about how bad my cholesterol is or what drug doses to take. Another reason why we used to teach doctors long division, so they could figure out how many milligrams you needed. Now, there are much better ways to do that. So our education has to change because our relationship with knowledge has changed. It's now not about what you know, it's about what you can find and how much analysis you can do to figure out what's relevant. The second change in technology is social proximity. That we all know about friends and how our friends have changed. But all of all of these social media websites have changed our relationship to who we can be friends with and where they are. So it used to be, I called my folks once a week from college at the payphone at the end of the hall on Sundays, right? That's what you did. And if you had a phone in the room, you could call them from there. But I certainly didn't talk to my parents every day in college. The idea that I would talk to my parents after every class, that I would text my parents 10 times a day, I can't imagine. But the truth is, it's changed. And that also, when I went to college, I didn't keep up with my friends from high school because they were doing something else and they were far away. But now, students go onto Facebook and they're still keeping up with their high school friends. If they've moved, they've got friends from middle school, they've got their friends in college, they've got their relatives, and they can communicate differently with all of them at the same time. And what this means is that the idea of who a friend is has changed. Also, the idea of social proximity. Do I have to be near you to know what's going on in your life? So the person that might be my best friend, who I know the most about, who I'm most involved with, might actually be thousands of miles away. So why would I go to office hours? Why would you make me walk across campus? Or worse, why would you make me drive and park so I can have a 5-minute conversation with you about whether I misunderstood something on the last test, right? So office hours, to me, conveys two ideas that are kind of out of date. One, that I have to go to your office. And two, that time is measured in hours, right? So virtual office hours, if you like, is a way to acknowledge that what matters more to students now is how to get you quickly. Are you on Facebook? If you're not, fine. But do you respond to email? And how quickly do you respond to email? But you're going to have better luck with your students if you have some method of communication where you get back to students within 24 hours. And the office hours once a week or even twice a week is just not an effective way to engage your students. So spending an hour a day or half an hour a day on Facebook might actually be a better way to engage your students. Your students will talk to you more, you'll get more questions. We've all complained, oh, I sat in my office for an hour every week and nobody ever came, right? So which would you rather do? Spend a half an hour on Facebook every day and have lots of students answering you asking questions, or sitting in your office hour alone. So, but part of it is a change. Our students are different. Their expectations, the way they interact with the world is different. Social proximity is a change in our students, and we need to adjust to that. And the final big technology change is that of customization. Now, we understand what customization means because we all wanted to have it our way with our hamburger. But now it's everything. It's not just Starbucks and do you want a half-calf, double, whatever. Or your credit card with your own inscription on it, or your checkbook, right? Gaming has shifted the paradigm. Games are great teachers because games are totally personalized. A game responds to you immediately, gives you lots and lots of feedback. It gets harder progressively depending on how well you do. If you're having a harder time, the game doesn't get harder faster. It's customized and personalized to you. So then students come into our classroom and we say, okay, you have to all listen to the same lecture at the same speed. Our students aren't used to that. That may never have been a great way to teach, but now we have to understand that the students are adjusting from expectations of more customization. So a podcast, for example, allows more customization. Because in a podcast, I never have to say, oh, I've run out of time. I can always say, there are 15 more examples on this podcast. If you understand this concept, move on. If you don't, keep doing examples until you've got it. Most people won't need all 15, but if that one person needs all 15, great. There's 15 examples on the podcast. Most of us teach to the mean. We teach to the middle in our classrooms. We have no choice. So the very, very brightest kids and the kids who are having the most difficulty don't get the right kinds of attention. That's not good education, but it's been the best we can do. Technology does offer ways for us to give more to both of those groups of students on the edges. So that while in class we may still have to deal with what's happening in the middle of the class, we can now use technology to give extra stuff to those students on this end and extra stuff to students on that end. So technology will allow us to customize our courses more, and we should take advantage of that. So I call this the new digital landscape, and quite a lot of my book is dedicated to understanding this new digital landscape, and mostly to understand how it affects our teaching. So like my workshops, the middle of my book is dedicated to, so if students want this increasing, they don't want to come to office hours, they have this difference of social proximity or this different relationship to knowledge, how do we capitalize on that? What do we do? So in the workshops, we'll talk about things we can do to take advantage of this, but I wanted you to think about in advance this change with our relationship with knowledge, the change in social proximity, and the change in expectations, and in the ability of our world to customize to each of us personally. Those three things have radically changed, those three technologies have radically changed what can and will happen in our classrooms. In addition, think about our core mission, changing students, opening students' minds. If that indeed is our primary goal, how do we do that? What are the kinds of things we want to do? How could we sequence and structure our courses so we can do that? With the internet having more competition and especially cheaper options, how do we justify the value and how do we build more value into what is already a more expensive product? So to me, that's the why. That's why we have to engage with technology, even if we want our classrooms to be mostly technology-free zones. And those are the kinds of things we're going to work on in the workshops. So here's the homework. Take your discipline, whatever it is you take, and start with the basic freshman course, because there's probably the most competition for your freshman course. So take your Chemistry 101, or your Introduction to Psychology, or your Introduction to Writing, or English, or your Introduction to Music. Think about those basic freshman courses, and now go online. You can find, there's a resource page on the teachingnaked.com website. Look at Yale, look at Stanford, look at iTunes U. Just Google your subject. Get a sense of what the wealth of material, the wealth of content that's available. Are there self-guided exams? Are there games and modules that your students can play? Is there an animated model of something? Are there just lectures? Are there tests? Are there readings? What is available out there for free? Look at Merlot.com. What is out there? There's a lot of material, and again, you can look at the resources page to find it. But before you come to the workshop, come prepared with some sense of, in your discipline for a specific course, what's available. And from there, we'll start thinking about how to rework and redesign courses using more technology. Thanks very much. I'm Jose Bowen.